The Art of Flocking is a summer program with the Park District. And so it's basically we have 6 weeks of programming where we go out into different parks across the whole of Chicago. So like North Side, Central, and South Side of Chicago. And we go out with a van with art supplies and we do art workshops. It's really crazy, incredible, fun, and an amazing way to spend the summer. Um, but so the workshops are all based on different themes surrounding like social justice, immigration, community, themes that are super important and relevant right now. So for the summer, we focused on Hector Duarte, who's a Mexican Chicago-based artist. He's a muralist and does these amazing murals in Pilsen. So we got to talk to him and see his studio and interact with him and sort of base a lot of our curriculum and workshops off of what his artwork is about. And then the other group that we looked at are called Sapphire and Crystals. So they're a collective of African American, all female artists, and they've been around for over 30 years, which is amazing. And they do a lot of work to do with like ancestry, history, ritual, themes surrounding that, and community togetherness. So half of, all of our curriculum was sort of centered around both of these, this collective and this artist. So over the 6 weeks, we just developed our lessons and sort of just found ways to spread these out across our different neighborhoods. I was in the north side with my partner, and we really just got a chance to interact with children in a way that I didn't think we would have the chance to. Yeah. So, for example, one of our lessons, we made these like power objects that were based on this lovely artist. Her name's Rhonda Wheatley. She's also a Chicago-based female African-American woman. And she makes these objects that really incorporate like healing and things that are important to you. So what we did with the kids was we used these plastic cups and whatever we could find, little googly eyes and just like newspapers and fabric and paint, and we sort of asked them to think about things that they would like to either change in their life or something about themselves that they want to improve or help themselves with, and sort of just getting them to think a little bit more imaginatively about art and about themselves and how they can affect other people and where the spaces that they exist in. So for example, this one boy made a little cup that was supposed to be an angel cup that reminded him to be nice to his sibling. And that was really, really cool to see, and then sort of incorporate our own practices into what we were doing. With Hector Duarte's work, we did this lesson that was a mural. It was a mural-based lesson, and we just made like these community trees. So we had them think of things that would affect their community positively and put these words down on leaves, or if they had aspirations or things in the community they wanted to change, they could put that down on clouds. And it was really fun just because we got to take these big poster boards from park to park to park and have these kids add different things to the tree and sort of think about how they want their piece of artwork or what they want their work to be represented like that would be shared with the public at the end of the summer, which was really, really fun. Yeah. I think it's really important. As an artist myself, have been doing a lot of work that's much more personal, but of late I've come into like the public sphere, into the arena of making art that is out there and that you're interacting with people that you wouldn't think that you would interact with, or really just being so engrossed in like what's around you versus just yourself as a single entity. So I think just doing artwork with children has been so important, and then being in that sphere, being in different neighborhoods teaches both us and them more about what it means to interact in the public, what it means to interact in situations that you wouldn't otherwise interact with. So that's been really good. I think there is a huge necessity to be involved with art and cultural engagement in Chicago, in the neighborhoods. Just because it gives people different understandings. I know, like for myself, for example, I did not interact with like the Southside Community Arts Center before I started this job, and that's taught me so much. And there are all these rich art sources and cultural sources that are out there that need to be shared, cross-cultural things that need to just be everywhere in the neighborhood. But I think the Park District has been doing a really good job with that. And just the spectrum of this program in the summer really reaches to all corners of Chicago, which has been really, really good, and I think that's really important. So it's important that we're focusing on artists of color and artists with work based on the community that we usually wouldn't focus on. I know, for example, in the North Side, a lot of schools or places that I've been to don't really cover female artists that are African American or artists with Latina heritage, or Hector Duarte, for example. Like, a lot of the kids that we had found this really, really interesting, and it was really like a cool experience to be the one to bring that to them. And also just like shows them the importance of diversity, or the importance of seeing what you usually wouldn't see in your own school system or wherever you live. At the beginning of the program, we were told that we would get the chance to interact with Hector Duarte and Sapphire and Crystals as well. So early on through like the orientation process, we went to Hector Duarte's studio, and we spent like a whole Saturday there just sort of gaining more into his art process, about learning more about him as a person, and about his practice and about what he does. And that was really, really wonderful. He's such a generous man, so genuine, and it was really just enlightening to sort of gain insight into what he does. And so he uses like butterflies, he uses mosaics, and he really encompasses like this idea of having a solid community in what he does, and just the art of like collaboration with people. So he showed us some of these giant like butterflies that he'd make, or at La Ronda Paracata, which is near 35th Street Beach, which is where we had our culmination event. So having that with him before we started programming was really, really good, just for us to sort of start to think about what we could bring to the children throughout the summer. And then we also had another day where we got to go to the Southside Community Arts Center. And this was really exciting because I hadn't been there myself. But we got to interact with a lot of the artists who are part of the collective. We had a breakfast, and we sat down in a lovely like circle and just like had them all explain a bit about what they did, the importance of it, the themes that they work on, and it was really insightful, just sort of getting like what is like, or like more on like ritual and like objects and like the history of them as a collective and as this sort of diverse group with like members coming in and out with like a stable foundation. But that was a really, really fun day, and that sort of got us thinking about how we could incorporate this into our lessons. And then we did like a mock lesson plan on the spot, just to give us an idea of what we could do with it over the summer. A couple of the themes that were present in both Hector Duarte's work and Sapphire and Crystals definitely were community. You could see that there's just the art of being an immigrant, or being the other, or being a person that exists in the space where you're moving across and interacting with a larger community, was definitely present in both of the works. There's also like, I think just community. That was the biggest thing that for me I could gauge between the two of them, because when you do murals, these are public forms of artwork. When you have a collective, you have people coming in and out and all these themes that they're working on together, but it's important because it is work that you're doing with other people in a bigger sphere, or bigger scope of where we live. Yeah. So it was really interesting in the neighborhoods that I was in. So like, for example, Rogers Park and like Lincoln Square, and a couple of places like that, just sort of making sure that the kids were safe within like the context of what we were doing with them. But also being able to create a space where they could come and they knew that they would be learning something that was different, and like every day just coming in and being like, oh, like what are we gonna do today? I know we're gonna do an art project, and it's gonna be based on something that's exciting, or something that will help me, or like for example with saffron crystals, there were definitely like themes of self-care, or thinking about like your ancestry, thinking about where you came from, thinking about ways to make yourself or develop yourself as a person more, and sort of just working with the kids to start thinking about things like that was really interesting, which is one of the things that we tried to really put in through the summer. Our community event was really wonderful. We basically had a day at the beach, 35th Street Beach, and we had kids making butterflies on the spot, and we had like face painting and food and like swimming and a bunch of activities that they could do, followed by a procession with the Jabberwocky booth, which was really fun. And we just walked up in a procession with our butterflies and instruments and stuff like that to the La Ronda Paracata. And this is a beautiful site which was done by Hector Duarte, and there's a lot of butterflies and milkweed, and it's just really gorgeous. But leading up to the event, we definitely told the kids about it a couple of weeks before. And we had the kids at different parks start to make butterflies and start to make little murals and start to make little banners and flags and stuff like that, and start to get them to think about how they wanted to portray themselves as a larger part of this community event that they'd be in. I think we had a pretty good turnout. And it was just really fun having them know that their work would be somewhere else in a larger conversation. Throughout the whole summer, we had this idea, which is the art of flocking. So it's where we're moving as this one body, and we're always these individual beings, like birds, migratory birds, or the migratory pattern of butterflies, where you're always together, um, and an individual, but flying towards the same shared common goal. So our culmination event was held near 35th Street Beach, and we had a bunch of all of our kids from the different parks with their butterflies that they'd created over the summer um, come over and do a procession where we walked up with them, and we had music. It was led by the Jabberwocky music group. And then we had a moment where we could be grateful for the space at La Ronda Paracata, and we also talked about the summer and the art of flocking. And then we had a day for them at the beach where they could make some more giant butterfly sculptures, and had other fun events like that. But it was really fun just because throughout the whole summer, we really, getting near the end of our programming, we started to talk about our culmination event and get them to think about how they would like to portray themselves in the public, or things that were important to them in the community that they wanted to share. So they made flags, they made banners, they made community murals, and different things that they wanted to share. And that was super fun. It was a really great turnout. Yeah. I would love to see it just burst out much more than it already is. I think it's done a fantastic job of interacting with the neighborhoods in Chicago, with the general public, and that sort of thing. But I'd love to see it interacting with even more kids in different neighborhoods, becoming even more extensive than just the 6 weeks, and finding ways that we can really get the kids to interact with the different neighborhoods. So throughout our programming, we did a bunch of topics where we had the kids switch ideas with different neighborhoods. And that was really fun to get them to start thinking about the place they live in, and knowing that it's not just their neighborhood, but there's this vast, diverse population around them. But I'd love to see the program sprout out like that, reaching a wider audience, whether it's through schools, whether it's through community centers, just finding different ways to really push the program forward and out there. And then moving forward, thinking about organizations we can work with, or artists that we can bring in who have practices based on social justice or important issues surrounding community. It would be really great to involve them in some format or some way, even if it's at the culmination event or just sort of working on expanding it more than it already is. That's how I'd love to see the program bud out or continue to flourish. Over the summer, I think the program really did start to attack issues or address issues on segregation in Chicago, looking at different populations, different neighborhoods, and getting the kids to think about that, or sort of think about what their reality is and think about what other kids' reality is. And I think that to push this even further in the future, we could continue to do even more with different communities and really push the boundaries further so that kids, for example, in the north side interact with what's going on in the south or west side and start to really learn about what's going on in in the city, because there needs to be more of a cross-cultural exchange. So that's something that we definitely want to see in the future. We definitely like to incorporate artists from different backgrounds and continue pushing that forward. It was really well received this summer. I think that having more of that in the program would be very well received as well. And really just expanding the programming more to reach all the audiences throughout the whole of Chicago. I had a lot of powerful moments, I think, over the summer. I think the culmination event was definitely powerful, or having all of these kids come together and you see them literally as a flock of birds or as a flock of butterflies walking and doing this thing that's so rooted in just the ideas of community. That was really, really powerful to see. And then I think I had a lot of small moments with children just in different parks, talking about what they'd like to do in their life or different topics. Or at Langdon Park, for example, we had these kids and one of them was like, oh, I'm going to be in a museum one day. But throughout the beginning of the program, he'd sulk and like he wasn't really about it. But getting to know him over the course of the summer and developing relationships with them and being a stable event or thing that they could come to and make artwork at and have the space to do that and be aware of what life is like for them was really powerful for me as an artist and as a person. So I think the fact that I grew up in South Africa and that I'm an artist as well, with a practice based mainly around community, definitely did shape what I was doing, and it shaped my outlook. I think the neighborhoods that I was in gave me so much excitement to want to share a part of where I was from. So for example, we did this lesson based on like tea and like dirt and like material that are so natural and so common to me, and just like the idea of using what you have and things from like the place that you come from and being able to share that with kids over here was really enlightening. It also gave me several ideas for my own artwork. And it was really interesting to see the way the kids adapted to that and were very open and curious about the medium and about the culture. So that definitely affected that. I also think that my outlook on race, for example, definitely affected how I interacted with people in the spaces. I think that I learned so much about the dynamic between different cultures, different communities, but I have such an open outlook on that, which really helped me to really, what's the word? To really get attached or get involved. Yeah, to really involve myself in what we were doing. Yeah. One thing we did this summer was we were looking at ideas of solidarity and self-determination, which are themes that you see both in Hector Duarte's work and Sapphire and Crystals. And so it was really interesting, especially with a bunch of our kids at Langdon Park, for example. A lot of them knew each other well. They lived in like one of the houses super near the park. And it was one of the most diverse parks that we'd been to, with a bunch of refugee kids and then also kids that had different ethnic backgrounds and that sort of thing. But throughout all of our art activities with them, they sort of policed each other and sort of helped each other out. There were a lot of kids who would see that their work wasn't what they thought it should be or up to standards, and they felt really bad about it. But then after time, we got them to sort of start looking at their work in a way that they didn't have to measure it up to someone else's standards, or that they have their own standards that they can measure it up to, and sort of learn and grow with what they're doing. But it was really interesting to see one of our kids like hated his work at first, and then after some time, he started to push through and see the beauty in it, and just the idea of self determination through that was really powerful. Yeah.